Hello folks, my name is Mark, this is Why I Hate the World, how you guys doing? So in 2011, I made a video called People Who Piss Me Off, Libertarians. Right, which I have gotten a lot of responses from libertarians on because it seems like whenever you make a video about libertarianism, they kind of come out of the woodwork to like defend themselves and then to call you stupid and stuff like that. And it's like, whatever. You know, I'd probably be a lot more successful on YouTube if I made more videos about libertarians and how they're dumb. Anyway, so, yeah, you know, throughout the years, I would occasionally get, you know, people trying to refute my video, blah, blah, blah. And then in 2018, about 2 years ago, I got another response from a couple of guys named Back Alley Philosophy. So, I just want to kind of show you what these guys look like. Alright, so this here is Back Alley Philosophy, right? And it's these two guys, one of them, you know, they have these cartoon avatars, and one of them is, I guess this is a lizard or something, dressed up in like a monk's robe or a Jedi robe, and I don't know what's with his face. He's got some kind of weird facial tattoo or some shit, you know, like he's fucking, you know, an earthbender or something, I don't even know. And then this guy over here is like discount rip-off Star Fox. Seriously, like, that's what he is, like a space wolf guy, like, kind of furry or whatever. I don't know what's going on with that, but anyway, they made this half-hour long-ass video calling me an idiot and all this stuff, and it's like, whatever. You know, generally, I don't really give a shit when people, like, make responses to my stuff, and I don't really care. That's not what my channel's about. You know, my channel is about me expressing my opinion, and you can agree or disagree, and if you don't like it, that's good on you, you know. Feel free to disagree. It's a free country. But, you know, I never really responded to these guys for that reason. It's like, whatever, you know, they can think what they want to. And, but occasionally I'll get messages from that channel, people commenting on it, calling me an idiot, stuff like that. And there was another guy named Philosopossum who responded on that video and wanted me to respond to him. So, okay, well, you know, if you want me to, then I will respond. So, anyway, another thing before we start here, this guy Philosopossum used my video in his video response. So that's what I'm going to do back here. I'm going to be, you know, talking and making comments over his video, and that's fair use. So I don't want to hear any bullshit about any copyright strikes or any crap like that, Philosopossum, because I did not make any strikes against you. So if you do that to me, then that's dirty and underhanded. So please don't do that. I am, you know, only doing the same thing that you did yourself. So anyway, let's get a move on here. So this is, let me just make myself small and put myself in the corner. There we go. And let's turn on my left monitor. Okay. And this is Philosopossum versus Why I Hate the World. People who piss me off, libertarians. But his video is called People Who Piss Me Off, Authoritarians, because I must be an authoritarian if I think libertarianism is bullshit. I guess there's no middle ground. You know, it's all black and white, right? I guess so. Now let's see. Let's go ahead and start off here. And if it looks like I'm reading, it's because I am, because I got notes here, because, you know, one like way that these guys like to debate is by that sort of gish gallop, you know, approach, where they just say a bunch of shit really fast, and then you have to like either skip it or respond to it, try to respond to it as much as you can, you know, and if you don't respond to it, it like makes it look like you're losing. So it has that double effect of making them look smarter than they really are, but then also making you look like you don't know what you're talking about. So we're going to cover a lot of different subjects in this video, you know, everything from government regulations to like banking, the FDA, child labor, stuff like that. And, you know, each one of these subjects could be in and of itself its own video. You know, we could really make a video just on, for example, banking, libertarian, you know, responses to banking, you know, and how they think it should be, you know, lack of regulation is good, blah, blah, blah. We could make an entire video out of just that. But, you know, that's the That's the problem with this. That's why this is going to end up being like a 3-part series, because even though his video is only 16 minutes long, you know, I got through about 5 minutes here, and I already have like 45 minutes worth of material. So, you know, unless you want me to make a fucking 3-hour video and shit, we're going to have to break it up, right? Either that, or I'm going to have to skip a bunch of the stuff that I think is irrelevant. And if I do that, the guy's just going to respond and say, he didn't address this, 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 and this point, so he must be an idiot. He must not know, he must not have a response to me. That's what's going to happen. So this is why we're doing it in this long format. Okay, moving on here. Let's get started. Like that music, by the way, man. It sounds kind of like the Toe Jam and Earl soundtrack, you know? I don't know if you've ever played Toe Jam and Earl. It was like this really cool game on the Sega Genesis back in the day. Sounds just like this. But anyway, moving on. Libertarians are like normal right-wingers, but more crazy. They have all the misplaced smugness, misinformed idiocy, and deliberate ignorance of normal conservatives, but with a big heaping of conspiracy theory to make them more batshit insane. Everything a conservative does, a libertarian wants to do better, like there's some kind of annoying little brother trying to get attention.
Yeah, libertarians are just like conservatives. If you ignore the drug war, isolationism, like tariffs and immigration restrictions and increased police and military power. Yeah, they disagree with like half their platform, but other than that, if you overlook that tiny little detail, yeah, they're practically indistinguishable.
So, to start out, I don't like libertarianism. Okay, I think it's a load of shit. And the reason why I think it's a load of shit is because it's formulated nearly always to support the positions of big businesses and corporations over everybody else. And that's kind of a theme that you're going to see through a lot of what we're going to talk about today, is that it's just over and over and over again, the libertarian position is to like provide intellectual cover for big businesses, for corporations, in order to allow them to pollute, to pay people low wages, to not have regulations for food safety, for their product safety, stuff like that. That's what all of it amounts to, right? Everything from environmental policy to child labor. You know, it's a philosophy that's designed to give cover for these people as they fuck over the bottom 99%. So, but however, you know, they're not a unified block. So libertarianism, of course, is a range of thought, you know, and like all, I mean, and it's not just the political party that I'm talking about, but, you know, just the libertarian political philosophy, right? And like all philosophies that fall under a large umbrella like that, there's usually a lot of different, you know, there's a range of different opinions and a range of thought there. There's, you know, conservative libertarians who are nearly indistinguishable from conservative Republicans almost, you know, there's more liberal libertarians who believe in things like, you know, who actually do believe in things like abortion or abortion rights or drug rights or, you know, or anti-war, that kind of thing. But so it's not a unified block at all. But there is a very large overlap with the conservative right, you know, with conservative beliefs. And that kind of underpins a lot of what you see in libertarian thought, you know, preference for a smaller government, for example, adherence to supply side economics for the most part, support for the Second Amendment, stuff like that. Those are all things that they share, you know, with conservatives, you know, conservative Republicans, right? And so how similar are they exactly, right? You know, because you often hear people say things like, well, libertarians are just Republicans that want to smoke weed and get laid, right? So how similar are they? Well, we actually have here, let's see, I've got a study here, not that one. Here we go. So this is from the Cato Institute, results from the 2016 Post-Libertarianism versus Conservatism Debate Survey, right? And I'll put the links to all of this stuff down in the bottom so you guys can see it. But basically, this is a survey that they did, between libertarians and Republicans to see where they match up and where they don't match up, right? And thankfully for us, this is very easy to read. It has lots of big graphs and stuff that translate well to a video, right? And you see here, this table, how concerned are you about the following issues, right? So this graph here kind of tells you how much conservatives and libertarians match and what they differ on. So you got here conservative, blue, libertarian, yellow. Okay. And it looks like down here, when it comes to things like education, government spending, economy, jobs, taxes, healthcare, the size and government, regulation of businesses, free trade, income inequality, and all of that, this is all nearly almost exact. You see my mouse down here, see where this line is? It matches up almost exactly. And then when you start getting into social issues, it gets a little bit different. It starts to diverge on education. Drug use, for some reason, is like almost exactly the same. Immigration, then over here, these are the more social issues. Immigration, morality in society, terrorism, the environment, racial inequality, drug prohibition, right, stuff like that, the criminal justice. It starts to kind of diverge a little here, right? So that's pretty much, how well do they match? Well, it looks like about pretty much on half of the issues, all of the issues having to do with government, the economy, jobs, economics, that kind of thing, they match pretty freaking close, right? And it's only when you get into social issues that they tend to split off. The one big difference being here, terrorism, national security. Over here, this is like where they really diverge. You can kind of see that line is just like bam, right? And then also government domestic surveillance. Conservatives actually support surveillance. Libertarians not so much. So it's like, yeah, okay, they're not, exactly the same, but they do share an awful lot. Now, I do want to say here, though, that just because there's divergence, right, in social issues doesn't mean that the libertarian view on social issues is any more, equitable or liberal or whatnot. It's not. So don't think that. Okay, no, it's not because, like, say for example, they differ on drug, prohibition, right, legalizing drugs, or something like that, or abortion, for example. That doesn't mean that the libertarian stance on abortion matches up more with the liberal stance, right? It may have, similarity of outcome, but not for the right not for the same reason, Like another example that I wanted to bring up here was the environment. The environment, they're actually kind of sort of close almost, but there is some divergence, but that doesn't mean that the libertarian, stances and on environmental issues are closer to, say, liberal stances. That's not true at all, Libertarians, for example, don't believe in stricter pollution regulations, like at all. No, they actually tend to believe more that you can use litigation to, and property rights to stop pollution. And that, for example, that's a solution that really doesn't pan out very much in the real world. It's kind of unworkable, right? And we can get into that if you want, right? But anyway, like I said, this is another subject that we can make a whole video about. So that's kind of what I meant when I said in my original video that, libertarians are kind of like the little pissant little brother to conservatives, right? Because oftentimes the libertarian stance goes above and beyond what the conservative stance is on any given issue, So, for example, let's turn these guys off. Fuck those guys. So, for example, using the environment as an example, right? Libertarians, conservatives will believe in a very small amount of regulation, and generally conservative thought is that, corporations and companies and things would be, better if they regulated themselves, which is complete bullshit and unworkable and does not give the desired outcomes that we want, that the desired outcomes being like, a balance between a clean environment and, productive, factory or whatnot, right? But oftentimes the libertarian stance will go way further. They'll say something like, well, we just don't want any regulations whatsoever, get rid of it completely, and then we'll just allow the corporation to pollute all they want, and we'll just rely on market forces to control that. People just won't do business with them if, like, say for example, you're a Coca-Cola, cola bottling company, and your fucking factory is like poisoning a river. People will just stop buying Coke, and then that'll stop that factory from polluting, right? And it's like, kind of doesn't really work in the real world. It's like, well, no, we'll get into this a little more later on, but that solution is bullshit, you know. So that's the thing. It's like, conservatives want to cut regulations, libertarians want to abolish regulatory bodies completely. Conservatives want to cut taxes, libertarians want to abolish taxes, and they want to make them voluntary, right? Which would be abolishing them. So that's what I'm talking about when I say, it's like one step further, where like you take the unworkable, ridiculous, conservative policy and you push it one step further into complete wacky land. That's where the libertarian stance is, right? So, and to be honest, I'm not really so sold on libertarians being socially liberal either. I mean, in 1980, the protections for gays and lesbians were deleted from the Libertarian Party platform because you got Charles Koch in there, right? Like, basically, at the very beginning, if you went back to like the 60s and the early 70s, the libertarian platform was a lot more egalitarian than it is today, and that was because you had the influences of people like Ayn Rand, who were like, pro-abortion, stuff like that. There was a lot of objectivism there in the beginning, right? And as time went on, you started to get influence from conservative Republicans and stuff like that, invading the, Libertarian Party, using it, basically twisting it around and using it for their own ends. People like Charles Koch, Koch brothers, that kind of thing, right? So that, Ron Paul is another example, right? Basically Ron Paul is stanchly, he's anti-abortion, he's against LGBT rights, and he has history of playing, footsie with racists and white supremacists. And then, like his newsletters. I don't know if you remember, but back in the 80s, Ron Paul had these newsletters where, it's like fucking basically like the KKK wrote them. It's ridiculous. I'll put a link to them. You can find these online, and then you can read them himself. And of course, the excuse is like, oh, well, Ron Paul didn't actually write those newsletters. It's like his fucking name is on them. If your name is on it, you're responsible for what's in the goddamn newsletter. You should know what's in it. Okay, so that's another thing. It's like, don't give me this fucking excuse that he didn't know. And then you get guys who are like just straight up white supremacist wackos, like fucking Augustus Sol Invictus. I don't know if you know who this guy is. He's just, this fucking crazy white supremacist piece of shit. And that guy ran for Senate on the Libertarian Party ticket in Florida. Okay, so it's not like this is just some, crazed wacko nutbag, like, putting signs and shit on his front lawn or whatever. It's like this dude is actually running running for the Senate in Florida on the Libertarian ticket. So it's like, why is that? Why are there so many like racists and white supremacists in the fucking Libertarian Party? I don't know. I guess it's like, extreme beliefs attracts extreme people, I suppose, and yet it is unfair to categorize all libertarians because of the actions of a few. So I'm not going to do that. I just think it's worth throwing out there. It's worth throwing, and it's evidence that libertarians as a whole, the actual people who follow this shit, who believe in it, are not as, socially liberal as everybody thinks. There's one thing if you're going to take the official, philosophy, like you're going to take the philosophy that like people like Murray Rothbard write out or whatever, right? And then, or if you're going to take the official, like, Libertarian Party platform and stuff like that, that's another thing. But that doesn't really tell you what the actual people who vote libertarian or who believe in libertarian ideals actually think. And in order to get that, you have to kind of dig a little deeper. You have to check polls like this. You have to go to, read the comment sections on articles and videos, and, go to forums and subreddits, libertarian subreddits, and actually read through what the people who comment and who identify as libertarians actually fucking believe. And you're going to find a lot of that doesn't actually mesh with the official Libertarian Party platform. I mean, it's kind of like, it's really no secret that a large portion of the libertarian electorate, I guess you would call them, they oppose federal laws in regards to things like sexism and discrimination and abortion and all of that, because they want those things to be controlled at the state level, right? So that they can ban it in their state. That's actually really, that's the real agenda. I mean, if you really look and see what people actually believe and what they really want, the people who call themselves libertarian, that's what it is. It doesn't really have much to do with any kind of philosophy about the greatest, amount of freedom per person or whatever the fuck it is. I don't know. Libertarians want to cut out social programs.
Not cut out, fund voluntarily. There's nothing saying libertarians are against charity. You can help the poor and support social programs not at gunpoint.
So, here's one other thing, okay? Me, myself personally, I don't really have much in the way of a solid political philosophy that I follow, okay? Not really. I'm more of a pragmatist. So, and I know that the guy, making this video is going to watch that and he's going to laugh at that, what I just said. And it's fine. You don't have to believe whatever. Me personally, it comes down to, the practical effects of what a policy has on the lives of real people. That's what I care about. So I don't really care about, if someone's liberal or conservative or progressive or libertarian or what they believe or what they've said in the past, right? I care about what the policy that they propose right now, how is that going to make people's lives? How is it going to affect their lives? Is it going to make their lives better? Is it going to make it worse? Is it going to help them? Is it going to fuck them up? Okay, that's what I believe. So let's take a look at what that guy actually just said right now. We're not selfish. We just want it to be voluntary. We like helping people. We think it should be done through charities, in a voluntary fashion, right? Well, in real life, there is just simply not enough charitable spending to cover the amount of people that need help that government programs currently cover. It's not even close. So, right now I'm using these numbers come from the Lilly Family School of Philanthropy, right? And in 2017, there was a total of $400 billion donated to charities in the United States, right? Well, the Medicare budget alone in 2017 was, $582 billion. Okay, so it's not even close. It's like it doesn't even cover Medicare by itself. If you're going to include Social Security, that's another $1.5 trillion, right? And that's not counting, other assisted living programs like SNAP or food stamps or unemployment insurance or so on. It's not even close. We would have to give 8 times the amount of money that we currently do in order to cover just what's being covered by, government programs right now that you pay through taxes. Okay, so it's that's not a workable solution. Okay, if it was a workable solution, I'd be behind it. All right, because I don't like the idea of paying taxes either. Paying taxes sucks. Nobody likes paying taxes. That's another thing that they always say, you like taxes so much, how come you don't voluntarily give them? Nobody likes paying taxes, okay? We all agree in that regard. Taxes fucking are bullshit, all right? But you need them in order to have a functioning society, okay? Part of having a functioning society is having a social safety net so that the people who aren't you, right, who aren't able to go out and work, okay, for whatever reason, right, are protected, And why? Because you want to have a society where you don't have fucking beggars in the streets. That's why, okay? That's a healthy society, all right? You don't, that's how it used to be back in the day. You couldn't work then. Your ass was outside with a tin cup, begging people to fucking, feed you so maybe you might not starve to death that night, right? Who wants to live in a world like that? Okay, it's no, man. We have enough wealth in the country, right? We've always had enough wealth, actually always ever, in order to take care of everybody. Okay, since pretty much there's been the idea of wealth, we've always had, there's always been enough economic activity to ensure that everybody has, just the smallest modicum of their basic needs met. You don't have to have a giant mansion for everybody and shit like that. It's all you really, food, shelter, right, education, that's it, really. That's all you really need to provide for people in order to have a society that doesn't fucking suck, right? Right now, we're not even doing that shit. So one of the things I said in the comments to this guy before we started was, I think libertarianism is selfish, and that's because it has this underlying kind of theme of like, take care of yourself, and I'm not required to help you. It has that kind of like, underpinning a lot of libertarian like solutions on things. And if you're, so if that's your knee-jerk reaction when I mention social programs, that I shouldn't have to pay for these other people, they should have to take care of themselves. So if that's your reaction, then that's the selfishness that I was talking about. And if you want to be selfish, then just be fucking selfish. But don't try to create this elaborate like fucking political philosophy that you can fucking hide behind, so that it somehow screams you so that you don't have to feel bad about being a dick. Just be a fucking dick.
But they also want to cut things like the Food and Drug Administration.
Because they artificially inflate the price of medication so that underclass people can't afford it. And then lefty dipshits like you complain that we need government to steal from us so that poor people can have their medicine, even though government's the reason the poor people can't have their medicine.
So what he just said there is a vast oversimplification of what the FDA actually does, okay? And it proves that, he just doesn't understand what regulations are there for. He has no idea about the history of why we have the FDA or anything like that. Okay, so the FDA is, of course, a regulatory body, but it's not just there to make things more expensive, right? Let me steel man here, okay? Because this is what the libertarian argument usually is, right? When it comes to things like regulatory, bodies, but specifically the FDA, right? The idea is that they impose unfair and costly regulations, which drug companies and food companies have to, spend money on in order to sell their drugs or food in the market. And this artificially increases the cost and, can also keep people from getting the medication they need and stuff because it's not approved, right? And it makes sense, right? It does make sense. You go, okay, well, I could get this one drug here, but it's not FDA approved. Oh, it's approved in France, it's approved in Germany, but how come I can't get it here? These guys are fucking, preventing people from getting their medication, right? They're killing people, right? But in real life, it's really not that simple, because this view, it like shows a lack of understanding of what the FDA actually does and why we fucking have it, because it used to be back in the 19th century when we didn't have any regulations regarding food or medicine at all, any kind of wacko fucking flim-flam, scam artist guy could just cook up some weird-ass concoction and claim that it cured whatever the fuck he wanted, That's why we got the term snake oil salesman back then, because guys used to go around, hucksters and scam artists and carpetbaggers and shit, would go around with their fucking stupid, like, ridiculous miracle tonics, made out of, like, all kinds of weird shit, like snake venom and turpentine and, like, fucking formaldehyde and all this other, like, ridiculous, like, poisonous, toxic shit. And they would go town to town and hawk this stuff saying that it cured everything under the sun. Everything from fucking impotence to arthritis to baldness to, the fucking plague or whatever. Because you didn't have any regulatory bodies back then. There was no requirement for testing. Okay, anybody could say any kind of shit they wanted. So people would buy this ridiculous toxic shit and it would make all their hair fall out or kill them or whatever. And then the fucking dude would just, hop back in his, like, trailer, his fucking carriage, horse-drawn carriage and shit, and be in another town before anybody knew what happened, right? That's what it was like. That was what medicine was like before we had the FDA, okay? And that's what the FDA is there for. It's to make sure that there's proper testing for your medication so that when you get a medication, not only does it do what it's supposed to do, right, what it claims to do on the label, right, but it also doesn't fuck you up and kill you. That's what the FDA is there for, okay? So let's go for a more modern day example, because we're all here in COVID-19 land and shit, right? Everybody's at home fucking hunkering down, hoping they don't get sick and die. And we have our president, Donald Trump, go on the TV, right? And he tells people to try this medication called hydroxychloroquine to treat the fucking coronavirus, right? And why does he do this? Because he saw on TV, He saw on Fox News that there were some early studies that it may help people, right? So Donald Trump wants, people out there in the country to not be scared, right? He wants them to think that he's got it under control, so he starts pimping this medication. Go out there and try it. What do you have to lose? What do you have to lose? He actually said that. But the thing is that, it hasn't been tested for this drug, how do you pronounce that shit? Hydroxychloroquine, right? It's usually used for things like lupus, so it hasn't been tested for use for COVID-19. So it's, well, what's the danger, you might think? It's like, well, why not? Why not just let people try it? What do they have to lose, right? They have a lot of shit to lose, okay? Because, drugs have fucking side effects, okay? Drugs are called drugs because they do shit to your body, okay? They have chemical reactions that go through, and sometimes those chemical reactions can cure diseases or, lessen symptoms or whatever, right? That's the whole fucking point of that's why they're called drugs, right? Because they do shit to you. So you don't know what it's going to do in reaction to this, disease. You don't know what and it just so turns out that this particular drug can cause heart complications. Okay, so then there was a study in Brazil, right, which I'll put a link to the thing down here, where it turns out that they had to stop the study because they were giving people mega doses of this drug, and they kept dying. And it was like, after they stopped it early because, after the 10th guy died during this fucking study, they realized, oh, it didn't help. And now it's come out just in the last couple of days that there wasn't another FDA trial, and they found out that it doesn't actually do shit to stop the COVID-19, okay? So that's why we have the FDA, to make sure that drugs don't kill you, and they do what they're supposed to fucking do, all right? So you go, well, how come, we just don't allow, companies to just test their own shit? Because you can't trust them to test their own shit, because corporations are not there to help you. They're there to make money. So that's another thing that libertarians don't understand, okay? Why do you think corporations exist? They're not there to provide services or goods or whatever. They're there to make money, all right? And a drug company is there to make money. And if they spend $5 million, researching this drug, and they have a good drug that they think what it is, they want to get it out there and they want to sell it. So they want to apply it to as many different uses as they can, right? And if it just so happens that, that this particular drug has some kind of weird ass side effect or whatever, then, they'll just cover that shit up, because you can't trust you can't trust people who are have the profit motive, right, to do what's in the best interest of the public, because they're not looking at the best interest of the public. They're looking at the best interest of their bank account, okay? Okay, food is included, right? Because the same thing that happened with drugs used to happen with food, right? The exact same shit, used to be back in the Victorian era, bakers would cut their bread with things like fucking, chalk, right? Stuff like that. And you'd get bread that wasn't even made with real fucking flour in it, and had no actual, nutritional value to it. Right, so it was shit like that would happen. Or another example is, in the meatpacking industry, there's a book called The Jungle by Upton St. Clair, very, very famous for exposing horrendous conditions in meatpacking, in slaughterhouses, stuff like that. And, that book is actually fiction, right? But a lot of what it describes turned out to be true. That book actually led to federal investigators going in 1906 and going to Chicago and checking out slaughterhouses, and they substantiated a lot of the claims in that book. The horrendous, dirty conditions, and guys being worked like crazy, and rats and shit being ground up into beef and stuff like that. Pretty much the only claim that they weren't able to substantiate was the claim that human beings would occasionally fall into the grinders and get ground up and sold as beef. Apparently that didn't really happen, And because of that, that was that's what led to the first federal beef inspectors, right? To make sure people weren't dying of fucking spoiled, rotten fucking beef that's just ground up in a hamburger and sold as grade A, right? So the same thing, if you think this is just shit that happened back then, the same thing happens today in, all over the country, right? Things like baby spinach gets recalled constantly because of salmonella. I mean, that happened in 2019 several times, right? you know. And the thing is that, I'll put a list, because I have a nice list of all food recalls, and it'll surprise you like how many there actually are. But the thing is like, for example, that Dole recalling baby spinach in 2019 because of salmonella. That wasn't because of an internal company test. That was because of a random test conducted by the Michigan Department of Agriculture. So it's like, so if you're saying that a corporation or a company can police themselves, or we don't need to do these tests, it's like, well, no, man, because we do, because we keep finding it. Okay, because these tests happen constantly. It's like pretty much every single month there's like some kind of food recall one way, one place or another, right? And here's the thing: is that you're going to hear from the libertarian guy, right? Because this is usually the standard canned libertarian response. Well, a lot of these people are desperate, when it comes to medication, right? And they're desperate, they're dying, they need help. So why not let them use the experimental medication? What do they have to lose? Like we were talking about with COVID-19, and it's because the general public is not supposed to be used as guinea pigs for untested drugs. That's why. I mean, it's fine and dandy if you yourself personally want to take that risk. But society is not all about you, Allowing people to use untested and potentially dangerous medicines and stuff like that, that puts thousands of people at risk, and it's irresponsible, right? And one of the roles of the government is to ensure the general welfare, right? It says that, to ensure the general welfare of the United States. I mean, that's what government is there for, to protect people. Right, and part of that is making sure food is pure and doesn't have like rotten meat or rat parts or ground up nails in it or whatever. And medicine doesn't kill you; it doesn't make your fucking heart explode, right? And medicine says it does what it fucking says it's supposed to do, and it doesn't poison you, and it doesn't rip you off, right? That's part of the fucking mandate, and that's what the FDA does, okay? But don't take my word for it. Okay, because here's the thing: you are free to do whatever you want, to imbibe any kind of substance you want. And just because the FDA says you can't have it, go get it. I don't care. Be my guest, right? Go ahead and try the weird ass, unproven fucking alternative medicines and shit that you want. Go ahead and waste your time and your money with things like holistic, medicines, or things like fucking colloidal silver. All right. In fact, you know what? I want to kind of show you, because I like pointing this out. And I've actually mentioned this in several of my live streams. And I think it's because, it bears repeating, because this is like actual, proof, right? That not following the science, not doing proper testing can lead to detrimental results. Okay. This guy right here, this is U.S. Senate candidate Stan Jones in September 23rd, 2002. He ran on the Libertarian ticket, right? And, so look at him. His skin is blue here. Why does his skin have that weird kind of grayish blue color? Because he took a substance called colloidal silver. Right, so, if you don't know what colloidal silver is, it's basically what they had back in the day before they developed antibiotics. And it's very popular among, fringe far-right groups, people like anti-vaxxers and stuff like that, right? Because, they used to take it way back in the day, right? But here's the thing: colloidal silver is banned by the FDA. You're not supposed to, be able to buy and drink this shit, so people are like, making their own concoctions of it, and that's what it does to your skin. If you drink too much of it, the silver salts build up in your body, you get this weird ass fucking skin pigmentation. I think it's called agrippia, something like that, and it can lead to health complications later on, and just I want to throw this out here. It's like, this is, this guy is an actual libertarian candidate. He ran for the Senate, right? And just another, as a side note here, Stan Jones was opposed to abortion and same-sex marriage, and believed in the New World Order conspiracy theories. So I just thought I'd throw that out there. I mean, I know that doesn't mean that it applies to all libertarians, obviously, of course not. Just want to make, mention that. Okay. So anyway, let's see here. Let's move on.
Department of Education.
If the Department of Education actually worked, I wouldn't be making this video right now.
Ha ha ha. Yeah, well, it always surprises me how libertarians are always so arrogant, so full of themselves, but then also so, like, claiming a victimhood at the same time. You know what I mean? Anyway, but you probably would have learned a lot of the shit that I'm telling you if the Department of Education actually worked in this country. Unless you're Canadian or some shit, in which case you should probably know anyway, because their education system is better than ours. But let's move on. The fact that you don't know all of this shit is testament that our education system is fucked up.
Department of Agriculture
Artificially inflates the price of food. No, seriously, that's literally all they do. Google Wickard versus Filburn.
to name it.
So that is like pretty much the only time in this whole response that the guy actually cited a source. Now, that of course, and they artificially inflate the price of food, is also another vast oversimplification of what they really do. Okay, what they really do is subsidize farmers. Okay, so you've often probably heard about this. Okay, well, the Department of Agriculture gives a subsidy to a farmer to not grow food, right? So you have farmers laying around doing nothing, getting paid, right? Well, why do they do that? Why do they do that? The reason they do it is to keep prices stable. See, because it's not about having low prices, right? It's about having stable prices, So we have stable markets, and that's why we have farm subsidies, right? Because that's why they pay the farmers not to grow food, so that way, they'll grow less of it, so it keeps the price stable because we have overcapacity in the country, all right? We have industrialized farming that could grow 5 times the amount of food we really need, right? And well, what happens if you have way more than what the demand is for any given commodity? The price goes down, okay? That's what happens. So you grow too much wheat, the price of wheat goes down, right? They buy the wheat, and the farmer's not making enough money to actually like sustain his farm anymore. So in order to keep that price stable and to keep it from fluctuating depending on how much supply there is, right, they subsidize farmers. Okay, and that's been pretty successful over the past, 50, 60 years, right? We haven't had wild fluctuations in prices of farm goods like we used to back at the, in the 18 fucking 80s and 90s and the turn of the 20th century before we had farm subsidies. A lot of what these regulators do is in the interest of promoting a stable society, but that idea is foreign to libertarians because libertarians don't give a shit about society because it's all about themselves. It's a selfish ideology that attracts selfish people, right?
A few. It's one thing to want to cut government spending on social programs because it goes against your political views.
We don't want to cut them because they go against our political views. We want to cut them because we believe you have the right to spend the money that you earn however you decide.
Yeah, that's bullshit. Okay, that's a bullshit excuse, right? The real reason is because they don't want to pay taxes. Okay, that's pretty much all of the libertarian thought when it comes to government, it comes to economics, employment, shit like that, focuses around the idea that rich people should not have to pay taxes. And that's what I meant when I said earlier in the video that it's just a screen to give intellectual cover for fucking the upper 1%, because that's exactly what it's all about. Here's the thing about these programs, right? A lot of them won't help you personally. Okay, farm subsidies is not going to help you unless you're a farmer, right? Directly, right? Things like welfare, things like unemployment insurance. If you're not unemployed, it's not going to help you directly, but it helps society, and you benefit from that because you benefit from a stable society, right? It is in society's best interest to have stable food prices, to have people who are not destitute, poor in the streets, right? To have, people who are able to get health care and buy food and have money to spend for the economy, right? It's in society's best interest to have educated populace, all of that stuff. So even if you're employed and you don't have kids that go to school and you're not a farmer and all this other shit, you're benefiting from the stable society, right? That's what it is. But libertarians don't believe in that shit because it's all about them. It's all about them themselves. They don't give a fuck about anybody else. They don't believe in the social, contract. Yeah, they don't think that they're responsible for the welfare of anyone else ever. Everybody should take care of themselves, and if you can't do it, too fucking bad.
It's another thing to remove highly successful programs that provide vital and essential services which directly benefit the public, even saving lives in some cases.
Do you have any sources or evidence that suggests that these programs are necessary or helpful? If you're arguing that we shouldn't cut them and that we should keep them, that's going to be kind of important.
Yeah, well, good source for, say, Social Security would be the National Academy of Social Insurance, right? This is one that I found that's actually pretty nice. It's got a lot of really good articles with some stats and stuff like that. Fun fact, in 1934, before Social Security, over half of seniors were poor in the country. Today, that number is 10%. So I'd say that's pretty successful. Another stat about Medicare, 17.8% of Americans are covered by Medicare. That also includes people who are under the age of 65, disability payments, right? And so the standard canned libertarian response to whenever you talk about Social Security in particular is that, well, they can manage their money better. That's probably the, one thing that they'll say. That's one answer that I get over and over again. It's like, well, I don't need the government investing my money. I would do better if I got that Social Security money myself and then invested it myself. I want to be in control of it. I make better choices. Yeah, well, that might be great, once again, for you. Okay, you might be like a superstar hedge fund manager guy who like knows the stock market inside and out and can like turn $10 into $1 million. But not everybody else is like that, okay? Not everybody has the smarts, the time, or the training in order to manage a fucking stock portfolio, right? And for the vast number of Americans, it's like, the people who actually work for a living out here in the country, knowing that you'll have that bit of money when you retire, so that you don't have to work every single day until you fucking drop dead, is very comforting to people. It's good to know that when I turn 65, right, that I'm not going to be like schlubbing away in a fucking McDonald's somewhere scrubbing a toilet if I don't have to. I'll actually have a little bit of cash, and maybe I might have to work part-time or once in a while, but it'll be because I want to, not because I have to, right? That's good to know. People didn't have that shit back in the day, all right? And that's why, that's why 50% of people over the age of 65 were fucking poor, destitute back in the 30s. That's exact, so if your goal is to reduce the number of poor people who are seniors, Social Security is definitely a very successful program. Medicare is also a pretty successful program too, because we live in a country that doesn't have it doesn't have universal health care. Okay, we live in a country where if you can't afford health insurance, then you don't get health care, right? Because the cost of health care is prohibitively expensive without insurance, even with insurance sometimes. And if you're someone who's disabled to the point where you can't work, and if you don't have any family to take care of you, anything like that, then you're shit up creek, you're up fucking shit creek. A story comes to mind, right? And I'll find this and I'll put it in the link down here. But a story comes to mind of a guy who was a paraplegic from the neck down, couldn't move, and how hospitals kept just like transferring this guy all around to different places because he didn't have insurance, because he was like homeless. And in Los Angeles, they actually dumped him on Skid Row. Like, the guys, they basically put him in a wheelchair, just left him out on the street, the end. And this dude was like crawling on the ground, using his neck and shit to like, crawl on the ground, crying, with a fucking diaper on and shit. Right? I'm going to find that and I'm going to put it down so that you can read. That's what happens to people who can't make money in the United States, all right? That kind of people like that are what Medicare is for. And if your goal is to take care of people like that, right, then, people who don't have other people to take care of them, right, your charity isn't fucking doing it. Charity wasn't helping that guy. That guy should have been on Medicare, okay? So anyway, moving on. So then I do want to show you one thing here before we move on here. This wording here, right, apparently libertarians are against fire departments, is something that he superimposed on my video, right? I didn't originally put that. So why did I, why did I put that in the video here? Why did I put that cartoon of a guy like, you know, refusing fire service, right? Because that actually happened. Okay. You know, remember this video was from 2011, right? Well, here's a story from 2010 about firefighters who let a home burn down. Okay. This is, I will put this in the link too, from NBC News. No pay, no spray, firefighters let home burn. What's the story? Because this was big in the news back then. And that's why I made a reference to it in that video. So in rural Tennessee, right, there's a $75 service charge, which is a fee that the fire department down there paid, you know, charged you, and you had the option of not paying this fee. And if you didn't pay the fee, they wouldn't put out your fire. That was the risk, right? Lo and behold, this guy, you know, decides he's not going to fucking pay it. Then his fucking house catches on fire, right? So the fire department shows up. They find that he didn't pay the fee, and guess what? They let his house burn down. Okay. That's basically what happens when you have privatized services like that, okay? If you had a privatized fire department, a privatized, you know, police department, right? Privatized medicine, okay? You don't pay, you don't get the service, all right? That's what happens when you turn essential services into a commodity. This is what fucking happens, right? And the reason, you know, that cartoon was like, you know, against that, because that's a very, you know, that's something that libertarians have kind of said. And, you know, I encourage you all to kind of go and look up this story and look at the, you know, what the libertarians were saying when this actually happened. And a lot of these guys were, you know, in support, right, of, you know, using market forces to fight fires. In fact, I have another thing here from lp.org. You see if I can find this here. Let me find this lp.org. Market forces are better at fighting fires. Let me open my link here. Okay. This is from, come on, load, you piece of shit. Market forces are better than feds at fighting fires. You know, basically this is from, you know, lp.org, the Libertarian, the party of principle, right? And talking about the Woosley fire in Calabasas and shit like that, you know, that kind of hits a little bit home because that's, you know, that affected where my fucking house, the Woosley fire, you know, and yeah, basically talking about how it's cheaper and all that stuff to have, like, you know, privatized fire services, and it's like, well, if that's what you want, if you want people's houses burning down because they can't afford it, that's what'll happen. This the thing about essential services, right? The reason why they should be socialized, I guess you would say, is because everybody benefits from them, right? And because we depend on them to protect everyone, because it's not just, you know, once again, it's not just your house, okay? If you have your own fire suppression system on your house, and that's great, you don't want to pay for the fire department, then fine, that's great. But everybody else doesn't have that, okay? And I know this because I fucking 2 years now, every fucking year there's a gigantic wildfire right where I live. You know, 2018 I had to fucking evacuate. That shit was scary, all right? You know, and you depend on these guys to protect your house because you can't do it, okay? You can't stop a forest fire by your fucking self. It's not possible, all right? So, you know, and I can only imagine the kind of mishmash, kind of hodgepodge bullshit that would happen if we actually did have, you know, privatized fire services in where I live, and it was like a house by house basis, like it was, you know, in Tennessee there. This house burns, that one doesn't. Oh, don't save that house, you know. Ridiculous, because the fire doesn't give a shit. That's the thing. Fire doesn't give a shit what your politics are. It doesn't give a fuck if you've paid or not, you know. And it'll spread house to house, you know, regardless of who the fuck you are or what you paid for, what you believe. And it's in, you know, once again, it's in the public's best interest to protect everybody, right? And if you don't think that it's going to protect you directly, then you're an idiot, because it will, because the house burning right next door to yours is going to catch your house on fire. That's the whole fucking point of spreading out the cost, and, you know, spreading out the cost and ultimately the risk among everybody. Okay? Anyhow, and I just don't, and I don't understand why libertarians don't fucking get that. You know. Anyway, moving on.
Some of the more wacky libertarian fruitcakes like to claim that any department, service, or agency that is not specifically laid out in the Constitution by the Founding Fathers should be eliminated.
The primary purpose of the Constitution is to limit government power, not specifically to vest power to government. So it's unlikely that the Constitution would lay out specifically any programs or agencies to be implemented. It might empower Congress to create such agencies or programs, but it wouldn't in and of itself create them.
So this comment is pretty much irrelevant. You know, like when I said earlier in the video, when, you know, libertarians seem to be like very smug and like arrogant, like this is a good example of that. Really, you know, limiting constitutional power and defining constitutional power is essentially the same thing. It's just basically a different word that, you know, it doesn't really mean anything different than what I said, you know. But anyway, what I was talking about though there in my old video was libertarian constitutionalists, right? And these are people that actually tend to overlap a lot with like conservatives. In fact, some people, you know, you'll also see online they're called libertarian conservative constitutionalists sometimes. And people like this, you know, it's like I guess Ron Paul and Rand Paul, Ludwig von Mises, Milton Friedman, stuff like that. And it's a view that generally, you know, anything that the government does that is not specifically laid out in the Constitution is unconstitutional, which is pretty much bullshit. Okay. That's what I meant when I said that, you know, any program or department that's not specifically laid out in the Constitution is unconstitutional. That's an actual strain of libertarian thought, you know, libertarian conservative constitutionalists, right? And it gets taken to ridiculous lengths sometimes. Like, you know, there's a lot of anti-tax, you know, wackery, you know, woo, I guess is what you call it, in libertarian circles, right? And you'll often hear of the sort of like conspiracy theory that income tax is unconstitutional, right? Because it wasn't ratified by blah, 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 or whatever, you know. That's where this comes from. It comes from the you know, constitutionalists who are going through and basically trying to find excuses as to why they don't have to pay taxes, right? So, but you got to keep in mind, okay, when you just said that, you are criticizing the view of libertarian constitutionalists in relation to these programs. Not my view. My view is that the Constitution is a living document that changes, the meaning changes over time, and it should adapt to modern life, and if it doesn't, then it doesn't fucking mean anything, right? And it should be, you know, ratified or even abandoned and replaced with something better. That's my view, right? I'm not the one going in and saying that, you know, get rid of the FDA because it's not in Article 3, Section 5 of the Constitution or whatever the fuck, right? So anyway, but something to keep in mind is that amendments to the Constitution are also part of the Constitution. So if there's an amendment in there that gives, you know, Congress the power to do these things like the Commerce Clause, for example, and that amendment was ratified by both houses and signed into law by the president and upheld by the Supreme Court, guess what? Part of the Constitution. So anyway, like I said, this part is irrelevant, and we probably could have skipped this one, but I just wanted to point that out there, you know, because it's just like a little comment there to try to make me look stupid when in real life what I'm saying is perfectly fucking valid. Anyway.
Yet these dipshits never seem to apply that morsel of idiocy towards any law enforcement departments, like the FBI, the CIA, the ATF, and so on.
Where does this guy get the idea that libertarians don't criticize law enforcement? Of course we do. Whenever there's a news story about an innocent, unarmed person getting a snot beat out of them or even killed, we're some of the most vocal about it.
Where do I get that idea? Because, you know, it's not so cut and dry, like I said. So that video was made in 2011, right? So it was really only a few years after the Bush administration, okay? And, you know, it just seemed like a lot of libertarians back there were pretty pro-war and pretty pro-police state, okay? Now, I get a lot of criticism for that point, for that particular, that point that I said right there, right? And I understand it because traditionally libertarians are anti-militarism. You know, they're anti-police state. They're anti, governmental power, right? And the reason I said this is because, like I said, in real life, it doesn't really seem to be so much, Um, and because during the time, back in the Bush administration, back during the Iraq War, stuff like that, there was a lot of support from libertarians, for example, for the Iraq War, for the Afghan War, enough to where it created a little bit of a schism in libertarian circles. I want to show you this blog post here that I got here. Not that one. Let's see. This is from Econolog, right? Library of Economics and Liberty, which is libertarian kind of leaning blog sort of thing, right? Organization. And why did so many libertarians support the war? So I mean, the thing is that yeah, okay, traditionally libertarians are anti-war, but apparently a lot of them definitely were supporting it enough to where you have these sorts of discussions going on back then, right? Here's another one on Quora. Why are libertarians associated with the military if the military is authoritarian? Right? So, I mean, I'm not the first person to notice this shit. See, I don't care, right? Like I'm saying here, I don't really give a shit what the actual, official position of the Libertarian Party is. Like I said before, I don't care. I don't care about that. I don't care about what some guy writes in a paper about what libertarians should believe. I care about what does the rank and file actually believe, right? Go back to 2001, 2002, in the 9/11 era, okay, and go, like I said, go to news articles and stuff, go to libertarian forums and blogs and that kind of thing, and read about what people were actually thinking. And it wasn't as ideologically pure as you think. Okay, I mean, I'm not the only one to notice that a lot of libertarians seem to be ex-military. So why is that? Why are so many military guys, libertarians now? Is it because they were in the military and they now see how fucked up it was? I think it has a lot more to do with the culture myself, that sort of southern macho man culture, where you're gonna go into the military to get training and shit like that, and chances are this is this crap they always believed in the first place. It's no coincidence that there's a big overlap, right? That a lot of libertarians are very conservative, and they're also gun nuts, and they're also, ex-military guys, and a lot of that translates into being pro-military. And they're always the same dudes that, whenever, you mention people like police shootings and stuff like that. Oh yeah, well, go back, look up Trayvon Martin, right? Look up, all those, police shootings of different people, Tamir Rice is another one. And, read the comment sections. Okay, look at what people are actually saying. Go to Reddit, look up Tamir Rice in the Libertarian subreddit. And you're going to see that it's not all 100%, not as much as you think. And there's a wide variety of opinions. And a lot of those opinions are pretty fucking horrible. So, anyway, but I did want to mention this next thing that has to do with naked airport scanners.
Nor do they apply towards any kind of military spending. When did the founding fathers intend for us to have naked body airport scanners or military bases in Saudi Arabia?
Yeah, we're against those things too.
So, the reason why I brought up the naked body scanners, right, is because the person who actually instituted those things in the United States was the former head of Homeland Security, and his name was Michael Chertoff, right? And he is a staunch libertarian. He, in fact, he describes himself as that. And here's the thing. Okay, here's an article. Conservative audience laughs as former NSA chief refers to himself as unrelenting libertarian. All right, this is the guy, Michael Chertoff, self-described libertarian, who instituted the naked airport scanners at the airport that can, see your dick and stuff like that. This is the dude, libertarian, You know, now your response is going to be, well, he's not a real libertarian. Well, it's not up to me to decide who is and who isn't a fucking libertarian. Okay, that's not up to us. It's like that's basically what do you call that? The no true Scotsman fallacy. It's like, no, man. If the guy says he is, then who am I to deny what he is? Like I said before, libertarians are not a unified block. There's a wide variety of viewpoints, and if somebody like this piece of shit, or like Neil Bortz, that's another guy who, like, if he supports things like the Patriot Act or whatever, and he says that he's a libertarian, who am I to disagree? Now, you could say, yeah, that doesn't match up with libertarian ideals, right? Well, according to you, it doesn't, but what makes your opinion any more better than his opinion? Not really much anything, You can claim to be ideologically pure all you fucking want, but what do the real people who actually believe this shit, who follow this stuff, actually believe? They're not so much different than this guy. All right. So, sorry. That's why I brought that up there. That's why that was there. Because, the reason we fucking have those is because this guy, a libertarian, instituted that stuff. And then after he left Homeland Security, he went on to become a lobbyist, right, for a company called Rapiscan, who actually makes those. So, lo and behold, libertarian dude, a guy with libertarian beliefs, fucking, using government corruption and connections in order to self-profit off of the government. It's like, gee, I don't know, maybe you're right. Maybe if we just didn't have a government in the first place, this guy wouldn't be able to take advantage of it, huh? Yeah, okay, that's right. That makes sense. Anyway, moving on here. I can close some of these windows. We already got to that one. We'll come to that in a minute.
Thus, it seems the libertarians share yet another trait with the conservatives because, like conservatives, they like to apply their standards and values only towards those things which they do not like. Thus, libertarians, like their conservative cousins, are hypocrites.
Aside from the fact that libertarians and conservatives are not the same thing, the left is just as guilty of this too. They're against discrimination and for equality, but they advocate for affirmative action. They're against greed, but advocate for wealth redistribution.
Libertarian.
Yeah, first off, we already established that libertarians and conservatives overlap in a lot of ways, right? Secondly, the left is just as guilty. That's irrelevant because we're not talking about the left. We're not talking about progressives or liberals or the Democratic Party or communists or any shit like that. We're talking about libertarians. So to try to pull that, the left is just as guilty thing is just to deflect. That's a red herring. It doesn't fucking matter. It's irrelevant. Third, affirmative action is not racist. No, it isn't. Okay, that's bullshit, all right? Affirmative action programs, what they do is that all they're allowed to do, okay, is to try to, actively recruit from a certain population. That's all they're allowed to do, okay? They're not allowed to institute onto the college, okay, you must have at least, every 100 students, you have to have at least 10 black ones and 5 Asians and 7, Latino ones. No, that's a quota system. That's illegal. Okay. Affirmative action program is like, well, try to recruit from this group. Okay, these are disaffected students who are, poor, and they just also happen to be of color, right? Go out, try to recruit those guys, right? That's what it is, okay? And, it just so happened, because that's, they just happen to be poor and they happen to be of color, right? So it's not, it's not a quota program, right? And here's the thing, okay? Because I'm the first to admit that affirmative action is not perfect, all right? In a perfect world, you would not want to use race as any kind of determining factor at all, right? Because we're all supposed to be equal, right? But in real life, right, it just so happens that, the people of color are the ones who tend to also come from a very poor socioeconomic background. They're the ones that need help. So it's like, realistically, these are the people that need the help. Okay, so how do you help them without using their race as part of that process, right? Well, you know what? If you can think of a better idea, then I'm all for it. Maybe there's like just a test that if you score, and you don't put your name on the test, and if you score above this amount on the test, you win. and it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter what your race is, whatever. That's fine, you know. I could go for that. I could get behind that. So tell me what you have to replace it, you know. I mean, because here's the thing, right? You know, speaking of affirmative action, I'm actually part Asian. Okay, I know I don't really look it. I look mostly like a white person, but you know, you can see, right? And there's a big, you know, there's a big pushback against affirmative action among Asians because they say it discriminates against them, you know, because it shuts them out. And this is the theory among the Asian community when it comes to affirmative action, right? Well, this is you know, it's opening up slots for people who aren't qualified, and my kid is qualified, but he can't get in because this other guy got in instead of him. That's bullshit. That's not, you know, what it basically does is that, you know, your population excels above and beyond. That's a good thing, right? And you know, if you're supposed to take the best of the best, then you know what? That's like, I don't see how that's wrong. That's like saying I have too much money, you know. And you know, yeah, maybe you don't get into the college that you want to go to, but you can still go to college. So I don't know, but I'm the first to say that it's not perfect. And if you can come up with a better solution, I'll be behind it. If you can come up with one, if you can come up with a solution that helps poor people of color go to college the same way that, you know, rich people who are white can go to college, then I'll be for it. Because if you're rich and you're, you know, let's not bullshit ourselves, okay? If you're rich in this country, right, you can get into any college you fucking want. Okay, you can go to college, right? And it just so happens all the people that qualify there tend to be the same color. So, I don't know. Give me your solution, and if your solution's good, I'll support you.
Libertarians tend to distrust the government, which I actually think is a good thing. It's healthy not to automatically believe everything the authorities tell you. The reason for this is that the government is made up of people, and people tend to have self-serving agendas.
So you're acknowledging that people are susceptible to self-serving interests, but you're still advocating for giving certain people special powers and authorities that nobody else has. That doesn't seem dangerous to you at all?
Okay, so what this guy's doing right here is he's blaming the existence of government for government corruption, which is also a very oversimplification of what the problem is. Okay, that's like, you know, ridiculous. All right, God, it's hot in here. Sorry, I'm like sweating. In real life, the government is merely a tool. Okay, and like any tool, it can be used for good or ill. All right, you know, it's not the tool itself that is the problem. It's the person who uses the tool. So I'm willing to bet that if I were to use the same argument that he just did for, say, gun control, for example, right, he would say the exact same back to me that I just said. You know, if I were to go out there and say, hey, you know, having guns around results in more people getting shot to death, he would come to me and probably say something like, well, guns don't kill people, people kill people, right? Well, same kind of thing. You know, the government is not corrupt because it's the government. It's corrupt because the people in the government are corrupt, right? So, you know, anyway, though, I am advocating, right, for giving authority to certain people that others don't have. He's correct there. I am doing that. And the reason I advocate for that is because in order for society to function, there needs to be people who are in charge. There needs to be an authority. And the reason why there has to be an authority is because people are not equal. See, libertarians have this idea that you should just, you know, everybody is capable of, you know, competing at the same level. That's not true, all right? People are not born equal, okay? Some people are smarter than others. Some people are, you know, have better physical attributes. They can run faster, they can climb faster. You know, some people can draw. I can draw. You know, I'm an artist and shit. Other people have natural music talent, whatever. We're not all equal. We don't come from an all equal playing field, and that's especially true when it comes to, you know, our socioeconomic backgrounds, right? Rich people are usually born rich, right? You know, someone who's poor was usually born poor. That's just how it fucking works. See, you yourself personally, you know, you might be like a nice young strong guy who's capable of working 40 hours a week, with a genius level IQ and, capable of defending yourself from criminals and stuff like that, and smart enough to avoid being ripped off, and also make good financial situations. But not everybody is like that. Not everybody is capable like that. The lady down the street, the old lady down the street can't stop a couple of fucking burglars breaking in her house, right? The boomer guy next door has no idea how technology works, and he doesn't know what a fucking 419 Nigerian scam is. Shit like that. Not everybody is equal. So in order to level that playing field and ensure that people in society are protected, you need to give somebody, authority to enforce laws. And the only way you can really enforce laws is through the threat of violence. So there has to be somebody out there. And it's in society's best interest to have this, right? And, how do you prevent it from becoming, overwhelming, tyranny or whatever? Well, regulations. The police have regulations too. Okay. Seriously, so that's the thing. It's about, once again, it's not all about you. It's about having a stable society that works for everybody, and, policies that actually help people and not fuck them up.
For a libertarian, though, the government is untrustworthy simply because they're the government.
Mr. Strawman, give me a break.
Yeah, nice try, but the actual reason we tend to distrust government is because the authority, power, and role in society that they have means that they're more susceptible than private sector entities to succumbing to their own self-interest.
Oh my god. Okay, that is the stupidest fucking thing this guy has said so far. Okay, that is 100% pure grade A bullshit. Okay. I mean, the entire reason that private entities exist in the first place is to further their own self-interests. Alright, that is the whole reason why you form a corporation or a company or whatever. Is, why do you think they exist, right? Why do you think, for example, the power company exists? Is it to, give you power in your house, right? Or why do you think the airlines exist? So they can fly you around? That's bullshit, okay? They exist to make money, all right? That's the reason why they're there. That's why they exist, okay? To make money for the people who own them, all right? And if they could make money without giving you a goddamn thing, they would, okay? That's how... why do you think we have all of these regulations in the first place? Why do we think we have all these food and drug regulations that we're talking about, or antitrust laws, or laws against insider trading? Shit, holy fucking shit, it's ridiculous. I mean, have you ever heard of Enron, or WorldCom, or, Martin Shkreli? Remember that guy, the fucking pharma bro, that dude? Or Bernie Madoff. You ever heard of these fucking people? I mean, or the 2008 subprime fucking mortgage crisis. How many examples do you want exactly of private entities fucking being succumbing to their own self-interest? Because it happens constantly. I could give you 1,000 more. Those are just the ones I thought up right now, for crying out loud. I don't know. I don't understand this, man. If you really think that private entities are somehow less prone to corruption simply because they're, they don't have the force of law behind them, then you're a goddamn moron.
Thus, a libertarian thinks the government always lies 100% of the time and is always out to fuck you over. However, this same philosophy extorts that private businesses and corporations never ever ever lie because it's in their best interest to be truthful, to maintain a good public image and make money.
Libertarians don't believe that the government lies all the time, nor do we believe that private sector companies always tell the truth. These are both imperfect systems ran by imperfect humans. The question is, given what we know about economics and historical precedent, which system is more likely to be trustworthy? In the case of the private sector, there's a way to hold people responsible if they...
Okay, so, which one is more likely to be trustworthy, is what he's asking. Given what we know about economics and historical precedent, which system is more likely to be trustworthy, the government or a private entity? Well, the answer to that is, given what we do know about historical precedent and economics, it's a system where private entities are strictly regulated in the public interest. That's the one that is more likely to be trustworthy. Okay. Now, the type and amount of regulation, we can argue about that. But saying that no regulations is better, simply, that's just not correct. We have the historical precedent for what a society looks like when there's not sufficient regulations. Okay. In fact, we had, the Gilded Age, back in the 1880s, 1890s, before we had, things like the Food and Drug Administration, for example. Okay. We know what life was like back then. We have records, we have proof. In fact, we have countries on this earth right now who don't have sufficient regulation in their industries. And, for example, China, right? You ever notice how all these weird ass diseases that we get every year, they all come out of China, right? The flu every fucking year, SARS, H1N1, goddamn COVID fucking 19. All of those things came out of China. Why is that? Why is that? Because they don't have sufficient regulations on their food. Okay? That's how all these diseases keep popping up, because they take animals and they put them in these wet markets. They don't have sufficient regulations in order to prevent filth and shit like that, and then diseases jump species, right? Shit, I could pull up 16 different stories right now about how the food in China is horrible, and how guys are taking paper and fucking making them into filling for fucking dim sum, and and shit, what else do you want? Lead inside of fucking the paint used in children's toys, for example, is another thing. Holy fucking shit. That's why you have people in China throwing themselves off the fucking roofs of buildings and stuff at the iPhone factory, right? That's what happens when you put, your trust in private enterprise with no sufficient regulatory oversight. You get China, all right? Holy fucking shit. It's like, this is just the most ignorant fucking thing that I don't even understand.
In the case of the private sector, there's a way to hold people responsible if they lie or behave dishonestly. You can not do business with them. You can take their income from them. Government, on the other hand, you're forced to pay whether or not they tell the truth or provide a worthwhile service. So while both government and private sector may end up with some unsavory individuals, they're more likely to be held responsible in the private sector.
Yeah, that's not necessarily true. That there, what he just said, is the standard libertarian response that I always hear from libertarians when you talk about this. A private entity, you could just choose to not do business with them, right? But not really, think about that. Okay, what's he saying? He's saying that, you can boycott a business, right? And their reputation will go bad, and then other people will stop, they'll see the boycott that you're doing, right? And the company will get a bad reputation, and then people will stop doing business with them. But in real life, that's not what happens, And, the reputation and boycotts, it's not a sufficient market force in order to force the corporation into acting in the public's best interest, If a company has business practices that are harmful, or if their product hurts people or kills people, then if you simply don't do business with them, they don't just go away, all right? For example, if Crest, right, Crest toothpaste, if they put out a toothpaste that's filled with toxic fucking waste, then, you just stop buying that toothpaste. Oh, yeah, that's great. Sounds simple. But in real life, it's not that simple. What about all the other people buying the toothpaste, all right, and dying from it and shit like that? What about them? It's like, you're not, how long does it take for us to figure out that the toothpaste is toxic? And what about all those people who were poisoned in the meantime? What, too bad for them? They chose the wrong fucking toothpaste, right? As we're waiting, right, for the backlash against this toxic toothpaste to happen, these people over here are the ones that, are basically Crest's fucking guinea pigs. Those are the guys that are shit out of luck, I guess, right? What's the libertarian response for that? Because, my fucking, solution for that is to have an FDA that actually tests the toothpaste and makes sure it's not toxic. Okay. Under my fucking solution, those people are protected, but under your solution, they die, all right? Which one of those is better? Okay. Seriously, which one of those helps people? Which one of those fucks people up? All right. Seriously. I don't know. And the thing about boycotts is, they become ineffective. They don't work, especially when the company is large enough to have a sufficient market share. It's like you don't boycotts don't actually fucking help people. Like a good example of that is Amazon. Okay, Amazon is a gigantic corporation, and there's all these stories about how Amazon treats its workers like shit, and it's paying them bottom tier wages, and it's fucking working them to death and all that. But that doesn't really seem to make a dent in Amazon's profits. Okay, not really. You know, it's run by the richest man on fucking earth, who like had to be shamed into paying his workers more. You know, and that wasn't because, you know, he didn't like suddenly increase his workers like minimum wage to $15 because, you know, the reputation of the company was bad. Like he did it because, like, you know, they threatened to organize. Like Bernie Sanders fucking was involved in that shit. They basically threatened to fucking organize and like go on strike if he didn't do it. Okay, so they don't see, corporations only give ground when you force them to, whether that's through organizing, right? Organizing your workers, whether that's through the force of law, whatever, like that. They don't just do it because it sounds good. Okay? That's what, you know, PR departments are. That's why you have things like, you know, the entire public relations industry that grew out of, you know, government propaganda. Right. That's what they do. They go out and they spend money to make corporations look good so people have a good opinion of them, so that when, you know, bad shit comes about out about their business practices, they can spin that into something positive, right? That's the entire fucking thing. And like, you know, for example, that's how Chick-fil-A, I don't know if you remember Chick-fil-A, you know, they got in trouble for donating to anti-LGBT, you know, groups and stuff like that. They were able to spin that around and then have Chick-fil-A Appreciation Day, right? I'm not making that up. That's a real fucking thing. You know, and the contention that people in government positions are not held accountable, you know, that's simply not true either. Okay, government officials are prosecuted and they go to prison all the time. I'm sure you've heard this story recently about the Republican senators who got caught like fucking with insider trading, being investigated by the FBI now. Those guys are going to prison. Okay, you know, like that happens constantly at all levels of government. You know, I mean, if you want examples of that too, I can go get those as well. You know, and we hear about these stories, you know, how politician X or Y is corrupt. I mean, Lord knows the Trump administration fits the bill here, you know. But this goes back to what we said before, you know, it's the people. It's not the tool. You know, the government is a tool, and it's only as good as the people who are wielding the tool, right? So if you elect shitty people, they're going to give you shitty government and you're going to have shitty policies. But if you know, that you're not having a government in the first place doesn't solve the problem. It only makes it worse.
This leads to ridiculous situations where libertarians want to strip away needed government oversight from vital industries that have proven over and over and over again to be unable to regulate themselves.
I wonder where this guy is
Regulators.
getting
Regulate any stealing of his property. We're damn good, too.
Can we maybe get some examples then? After all, if what you claim is true, with situations like this have happened repeatedly, it would be fair to assume you can give us at least one example of an industry that went horribly wrong due to lack of regulation.
So I actually have a list here, which I'll put down in the thing. But first thing that came to mind when you said that was the 2008 subprime mortgage crisis, right? Standard & Poor accepting bribes to give AAA credit ratings to junk security bundles. That came to mind. That led to a huge, gigantic, you know, securities bubble which burst and resulted in millions of people losing their jobs and homes, you know. That was also not the first time that happened, because something similar happened in the 80s with the savings and loan crisis. I don't know if you remember that. And virtually the same kind of bubble happened before that in the 1930s with the great, you know, the stock market crash in 1928. Right. And those are all because of lack of regulation, allowed banks to take risks, you know, that they shouldn't have been taking, and the entire industry collapsed. So you want an example of an industry that collapsed over and over and over again because of lack of regulation? There you go. Banking and finance. So we've also been focusing on food and drugs a lot in this video. So a good example, right, of a drug that we can use is thalidomide. Thalidomide, right? So what is thalidomide? Well, it was a sedative that was originally marketed as a treatment for colds and flu and sickness, and it was sold in Europe. And it was tested in Europe, and it said that it had no negative side effects. It was impossible to OD on, and it was, marketed as safe for pregnant women. But what it really did was interrupt in the, development of the fetus until you got things like this. So, see these kids here? How they have malformed limbs, or this baby right here, or here we go, these children right here with malformed limbs and all that, these guys, right? See all this stuff? This is because, pregnant mothers who took this drug, they had interfered with the development of their children, right? So, this is pretty freaking bad. Okay. And just to kind of show you, what can happen if there's not sufficient testing, let's turn that off because that's depressing. So this drug was sold in Europe, and it took 5 years for them to put, to connect the side effects of this drug to these deformations that these birth defects that children were having. Right. Here's the thing. That didn't happen in the United States. You know why? Because the drug was rejected by the FDA. The FDA said there wasn't enough testing done, and it was not approved for use in the United States. Okay, Europe, it was all over the place, England, Germany, stuff like that, and it took them 5 years. And in that 5 years, there's the estimate is 10,000 children were born with malformed limbs because of this drug. Perfect fucking example right there of what, the system working how it's supposed to work. Okay. Now, if it was up to the libertarians, right, and their ridiculous, wacky idea that you should be able to take any kind of fucking stupid-ass medicine for anything that you want, we would have had 10,000 cases of kids born with, malformed limbs in this country. But we didn't. You know why? Because the government, regulations did what they were supposed to do. Okay. So there you go. Another one I got here, if you just want drugs in general, there's kind of like too many to even list. So here's a website called drugs.com, which has FDA MedWatch alerts, right? And you can basically go here and find like all of these different, stories on recalls and things like that for different drugs, Somewhere on here, there's an actual list of, drugs that were recalled, right? And it's a lot of them. So I'll put this down, a link to this down in the thingamajig down in the bottom. This is a good resource. Okay. Here's one from the United States Department of Agriculture talking about public health alerts and food recalls. And you can kind of see here, how many food recalls we've had over the last couple of years. This is Swedish meatballs, right? Due to misbranding and an undeclared allergen. Here is, let's see, what is this one? Chicken soup for an undeclared allergen, right? Here is romaine lettuce, right? This was actually because of, the romaine lettuce was because of E. coli. That was that one. Here is one for beef products, possible E. coli contamination. Here is one for Kosher Poultry Incorporated, raw chicken products due to possible salmonella contamination, right? Here's another one for beef, pork, and poultry products, contamination with Chlorospora. I didn't even know what the fuck that is, never heard of it. All kinds, so you can kind of see over the last couple of years, all of these different alerts, how many times this happens every fucking year. And keep in mind, these are things, this is not, the corporation or the company doing voluntary testing. This is stuff that how they failed, right? They failed testing from the FDA and the United States Department of Agriculture. Okay, so if the system was working, if corporations were capable of policing themselves, this list should be empty. It's not empty because they're not. Okay, they're not capable of policing themselves because they fucking don't. Okay, we can go into more of these if you want. We could look up, toy recalls. We could look up fucking, auto recalls. That happens every year, constantly, all the time. So, yeah, you want examples of like, products that going out that hurt people, or industries that, are damaged because of like fucking lack of regulation. There you go. There's literally too many to list. And if I were to list them, it would be like an hour-long video of me going through each one of these. So, ridiculous. Anyway, let's move on here.
How many child slave factories
Contrary to popular belief, free market innovation rather than government regulation is largely responsible for ending child labor.
are exploited?
Yeah, that is also bullshit. Okay, it's not true. Now, this is also not the first time I've heard this answer from a libertarian person. What did he just say? Free market innovation instead of government regulation is responsible for ending child labor. Not true. Okay, and what it is that he's going to cite statistics that show that child labor was on a decline, and it was pretty much gone by the time of the federal ban. So it was banned, in 1938, with the final ban in like the 40s sometime. I can't remember. The thing is that, it was on the decline. Okay, that part is true. All right, in 1920, there was roughly 1 million children in the country. Something a little bit over 1 million, like 1,200,000 or something like that, of children under the age of 16 who were working in factories, on farms, all stuff like that, right? By 1938, right, that number had reduced to around 667,000. So you go, okay, good, Well, yeah, that's still more than 500,000 kids in factories and on farms and in stores and, sweatshops and shit like that instead of in school, right? And the reason why it had been going down for decades before this really wasn't due to innovation at all. Not true at all. In fact, a part of the thing was that factories would specifically hire small children because they could crawl into machines and they could reach, pieces of parts of machines that adults were too big to get to in order to fix them, right? The real reason why that has been going down for decades is because the fight against child labor goes back all the way to like the 1830s, right? And it was something that, activists and labor unions were fighting against for a long time. It started like, with legal battles at every level of government. The first thing they tried to do was outlaw it in each state, and they would only get so far as that. And then they would try to do things where they would say, okay, well, school has to be mandatory, because school didn't used to be mandatory for children, right? And then, so each state had a different law saying, okay, well, your kid is allowed to work if they have this level of an education. And in some states it would be a 5th grade education. In some states it would be a fucking 12th grade education. And in other states there would be no requirement at all. Okay, and it was this patchwork, mismatch all over the place, right? And of different states with different requirements. And so like one state, a kid who's 11 years old could work in a factory, and in another state it's illegal. It's like, it was all over the fucking place, right? And that didn't do anything to reduce the number of kids who were, being used as labor. Okay. And oftentimes the children wouldn't even get paid. They would get room and board, right? That happened. A lot of orphans, for example, would be forced into labor. Like if you were like an orphan, particularly, you would often be sent off to fucking like work in a factory or some shit like that, because it was part of the American Puritan ideal that hard work is good for you, and when you're a kid you should be able to have a productive childhood and shit. It was seen as good for kids, good to have a productive childhood and not be an idle child, right? And that's the thing, is that so just for years and years and years they fought against it. And it turns out labor unions were really into this because, their children were competition for adults. All right. So one of the early, people who fought against child labor was Mary J. Harris Jones, which, if you don't know who she is, she was the inspiration for Mother Jones magazine, right? It was a very prominent labor union organizer back in the turn of the century, and went out and tried to stop child labor. Right, try to organize them, so that they can get better conditions and ultimately eliminate them completely, right? So, like I said before at the beginning of this, these things we're talking about, this is a subject that really is outside of the scope of this video, and it could be a discussion in and of itself, you know. So if you're interested in learning the actual reason why child labor was reduced and eventually eliminated, you know, please read up on it. A good source is the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. That's a good one. Another one is Child Labor Coalition. I'll put a link in the thing. You know, they have a nice timeline that shows efforts against child labor going back to 1832. You know, it's at stopchildlabor.org, right? And then, you know, also read up on the libertarian positions too. There's another one from the Cato Institute that I'll put a link to that says case against child labor protections, you know. So, you know what, let me just go over here, because I think I'm going to end this because this is already like fucking an hour long for now, right? But, you know, read up on their positions too. I'll put a link to this thing. It's basically, you know, the Cato Institute saying that, you know, child labor is necessary and shit like that because people are poor, and if they're not allowed to work in factories, they'll just become prostitutes and all this other blah, blah, blah bullshit, right? That has no basis in fucking reality, you know. But really, you know, ultimately, when it all comes down to this, you know, if you're interested in learning about this stuff, you have to take that extra step. You have to, you know, like I said before earlier, you have to look and see what the people who subscribe to this philosophy actually truly believe, you know. Examine the philosophy itself, examine what it stands for, think about the actual results and implications it would have for people in real society, not some made up fucking bullshit kind of libertarian fantasy utopia, but in actual real society. Think about how it would affect people, right? What would happen if, for example, you made all fire service, privatized? Right? What would actually happen if you got rid of all FDA, Food and Drug Administration guidelines and regulations, right? What would happen if you removed regulations on banking so that they can want to go out and spend and take, leverage their risk, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 times. So when the whole thing fucking comes collapsing down, they lose all their money and there goes your savings, right? Because we actually have, all of these things I'm talking about, we actually have the historical precedent for all of them. One thing this guy said to me, it's like, oh, given what we know about, history and economics, yeah, exactly. Given what we know about history and economics, right, we can definitely, in my opinion, say that, libertarianism is a load of fucking bullshit, made up. It's like ridiculous, selfish bullshit made up by teenagers. And here's the thing, right? Okay, because I want to show you this last one before we end this. I want to show you one more thing, okay? We are only at 6 minutes in to this guy's video, so there's another 10 minutes left, right? And that's the thing, is it's like I said at the beginning, it's gish gallop. If they throw so much bullshit at you, and you'll notice that this guy didn't really back up very much of anything that he said with any real examples, any citations. He left one citation so far, and it's like, the thing is, if I don't address these points, then he's gonna spin it into making it look like I'm stupid, because that's the whole fucking point of this method of attack. Okay, so that's why this is taking so long. This is why this is probably going to end up being a 2 or 3 part series, because, in order to properly respond, this is what it takes. Anyway, folks, that's enough for now. I'm hot. My head hurts because it's fucking hot here, and I've been talking for too much, so my mouth is all dry, so I'm going to end this. Adios, folks.